Hello, everybody, and welcome to the post UFC 273 recap video where I'm going to go over the fights that happened and get my thoughts, where the fighters go next, what was good, what was bad, what this told us, what this generally did. Interestingly enough, the webcam is not working today. So if you're watching the YouTube version, unfortunately, you will not see my lovely face, which is a shame because I actually got my hair shaved today. My head's all crisp and clean, and unfortunately, that's not going to be something you guys can share with. This was an interesting card. Coming to the card, it was a weird card in the sense that the top fights were exciting and interesting and impactful, but at the same time very predictable on a technical level. Now, Sterling did pull the upset off. I did not pick him, and we're going to talk about that in detail. So, like, some things get shifted up. But there's also been like a weird hot take environment that has come up after this. And I mean, there's always some hot takes after a UFC card. Always. Like, without fail, there's going to be some fight that generates an insane idea or a confusing rhetoric. But I think it's more than usual here because, for example, we've got this weird thing where, like, there's now a debate about whether backmount has a place in a street fight, which is weird. I've gone, I think, probably far too far down the rabbit hole. And then also with the Aljo fight, there are people that think that that was a robbery, and I'm going to talk about that in a bit. And I'll just leave it for now. I'll just say, if you think Aljamain Sterling won that or lost that fight to Peter Yan, I don't actually have a problem with that take. I think that there is a way to score the fight for him. But I think if you think it was a robbery, we have to have a serious conversation about what fight you watched and how you're watching it. Because I think it's insane. But let's get into this. As per usual, if I reference any stats, it's the UFC stats page. They're not necessarily accurate. Obviously, the only way to really get a great picture of the stats page from your point of view is to watch the fight yourself and kind of, bring out a pad of paper and make notes whenever a punch is landed or a kick is landed or whatever, because the UFC stats have always got weird things. For example, famously leading into this fight, Aljamain Sterling has never had a credited knockdown in UFC history per UFC stats, but did definitely knock down Jimmy Rivera. So there's some kind of weirdness there. Definitions of significant strikes, knockdowns, and so on. Strikes landed. It's never 100% reliable. So let's talk about the top of the card. Main event, Alexander Volkanovski versus Chan Sung Jung, the Green Zombie. UFC featherweight title fight. Wasn't a super compelling fight coming in. I don't think a lot of people, like, Chan Sung Jung has a lot of fan base, a lot of popularity, and a lot of emotion that blinds logic when it comes to what he's going to do. And the thing is that even with that, very few people were giving him much of a chance to win this fight. He was something like a plus 700 underdog. It was one of, I believe it was quoted as saying, these two fights both make the top 5 for biggest underdog wages in a UFC title fight, which is stunning. And of course, Aljamain Sterling, I believe, the third biggest underdog to hold the belt heading into the fight, with the only other two being Matt Serra during the second fight with GSP and Nico Montano against Valentina Shevchenko. So that was pretty insane. The fight itself, I don't think it really told us a ton. Volkanovski really took him apart. He outlanded him. He hurt him. He had a classy moment in the 4th round where it's like, are you sure you want to keep doing this? And then he finished him. Chan Sung Jung did land a pretty good shot in, I think it was the 2nd round, where he did stagger Volkanovski a little bit, but that was about it. He was tremendously outmatched in this fight, which is no shame to him. I think we have to realize that Alexander Volkanovski is an amazing fighter. As much as I'm always going to have this idea that as a 5'6" fighter, who predominantly likes to strike and use his wrestling when he needs to. I always think it's going to be a problem at some point. That like someone's going to show the depth, the craft, the range finding, the reach to keep him out of the pocket and just piece him up on the feet. I keep thinking it's going to happen, but at the same time, I have no idea who's going to do it. Hasn't happened yet, and he's passed every test put in front of him, basically with flying colors. Even if you think that Max Holloway beat him in both fights, and there are people who do, it's an amazing run he's had. The Ortega fight, again, brief moment of danger, but that was about it. And then in this fight, just almost entirely a shutout on his way to the victory. And we're talking about him fighting at 155 after this. There's a rumor going around that Henry Cejudo is going to challenge him for the belt after this. I'm not sure how much faith I have in that. The problem is that Henry Cejudo, and I want to say this, credit to Henry Cejudo for this. I do not like his cringe character. I do not particularly enjoy his cocky view of himself. But what I do enjoy is that he's trying to get paid. And we know the UFC does not traditionally go with that. We see that with Francis Ngannou and with John Jones now. We've seen that in the past with a number of different fighters. There's just a price tag that they're not willing to pay. And I feel that Cejudo is beyond that. But we'll see. It would be... I don't know how interesting that fight would actually be, because, I mean, it would be Cejudo fighting 2 weight classes probably above his optimum weight. And after a long layoff, I know he's been very, very involved with the Fight Ready camp. They're doing a fantastic job with everything. Really. Of course, he coached Chan Sung Jung for this fight, which is not a rousing endorsement, given that I just said Jung got very much shut out. But at the same time, I think he's active enough that it'd be interesting. But it's one of those things that, like, after a long layoff, I'd want to see someone fight a contender fight to see what they got after the layoff and then do it. But hey, Randy Couture, under somewhat similar circumstances, came back and absolutely stomped Tim Sylvia. So we could see that. It's entirely possible that that is what we're looking at. For Chan Sung Jung, he was talking about retirement possibly and a couple of things. I don't know. He still, I think, definitely is an interesting fighter. Like I said, he has an immense amount of popularity, has immense value to the UFC. So one would think that maybe they would sweeten the pot and maybe make him a little bit richer on the comeback. But we'll see. You never know. And that's about it. I would like to add more about the main event, but honestly, it was one of the least interesting fights of the night. Not that it wasn't exciting to watch. Not that the Volkanovski dominance is not a absolute sight to behold, but there's just not a lot of technical breakdown to really hammer in about the fight. There's not a lot of shifts of momentum. There's not a lot of classic value to it. Someone did say it felt very much like a boxing title fight, one of the lower end boxing title fights, and I kind of have to agree. It had that feel where we have an all-time great here, and he's fighting someone who just is an excellent fighter and has absolutely earned it and deserves all the respect in the world, but is not of that level. And that was this fight. Aljamain Sterling versus Henry Cejudo. Okay, so let's talk about, or not Henry Cejudo, versus Peter Yan. What am I doing? Yan versus Sterling. Rematch fight of a fight that had happened. Peter Yan getting DQ'd via the illegal knee, letting Sterling win the title. I found that Sterling's hate off of that fight was absolutely ridiculous. Because the thing was that people try to justify it where like, oh, no, he's cocky and whatever. No. He started doing that after the hate came in. Like, I mean this. I don't mean that you, the specific viewer, maybe you weren't turned off Aljamain Sterling until after he started being kind of like a champ persona. But the hate came in right away and was ridiculous. And I feel like anyone who's trained has at some point eaten a knee. If you're not ready for it and you don't see it, my God, the idea that he was milking it is ridiculous. But anyways, to the actual fight itself, I picked Peter Yan to win this fight because I thought Yan would have a lot of good reads to begin with, and that the end of the fight the first time being so one-sided for Yan by the end of it would carry through to this fight. And Instead, we kind of got the first fight over again a little bit in terms of the flow. We had a first round that was kind of weird. Okay, the first round is the one exception to this. Jan was aggressive. Jan was confident. Jan was reckless, you could say. Maybe cocky is a good word for it. And he was really actually very un-Peter Jan. I guess that's the base assumption I have with it. And a lot of people scored this round for Jan. I don't disagree with that because the number of strikes landed to me was about like +4 in favor of Sterling. The UFC stats page has it at +7. But it has to be said, Sterling outlanded Jan. I don't think anyone has any question about that. I think if you question that, you're a little insane. And even if we grant that Jan has slightly more power, slightly more damaging capability, slightly more destructiveness, then I still don't think you can say that this is a robbery because he didn't knock him down. He didn't significantly hurt him. He didn't take him down. And this comes up later with the Mackenzie Dern fight, I think, in a large ways. I think people rewarded Peter Yan for going forward and basically eating counters. Like face checking, not defending, letting Sterling land on him. Like moving forward on its own is not effective striking. It's a problem that comes up in MMA all the time, both with judging and with the literal fandom, is that we tend to over reward aggression and we underplay someone who's actually getting the way better of it on the exchanges despite not coming forward. And that was the first round. I think the first round to me is very clearly for Sterling, albeit not a great round. But if you scored it for Jan, I don't necessarily have a problem. But like, I don't understand this camp that is like, no, Jan won that first round, and it's you who scored it for Aljamain Sterling. That is crazy. To me, that is insane. The robbery calls basically come down to that. And then the second and third round, very much Aljo rounds. Third, fourth, and fifth round, Jan rounds. Kind of like the first fight, in the sense that Aljo started to fade. Jan got his readings. Jan started taking him apart. But in the meantime, you had that second and third round, which is very, very interesting because Aljamain Sterling got the takedowns. Now, the weird thing to me here is that I can't put my finger on what even is really different here. Because he did not get takedowns later on in the fight. He struggled there. So it's not like Aljo has suddenly solved the puzzle of Peter Yan and how to get him down. But he got him down. He took his back quite easily, locked in the body triangle, had control, and Yan couldn't get him off. And to me, that's the big question. That's where this whole like back control in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu has kind of come into play here. Is that every time there's a fight, someone's gonna bring up the idea of like, well, in a street fight, Jan was winning late in the fight, and he really just needed more time. And in a street fight, yeah, but Jan also couldn't get him off his back. If we're being honest here, Aljo takes Jan down in the second round, or I think it was 7 minutes into the fight, takes him down, gets back control, and then proceeds to rip his face off with eye gouges and fish hooks in a street fight. Like that's how that works. Like I hate the street fight analogy, but I hate it even more when like it doesn't work. When it's just insane. Because Jan got Sterling off his back one way and one way only, and that was the referee peeling Sterling off after the round. Quite insane. Also, just a scoring note here, 10-8 rounds need to be more common. They were doing it, they were moving in the right direction, and then the judges got slapped and told to move back the other direction. Because if you watch this fight, round 1 is scored with the same value as the other 4 rounds, which is insane because the other 4 rounds were all won by a much larger, much more significant margin. And Like to me, that's honestly just kind of insane when you think about it. And this is not the first time this happened. It's not unique to this fight that is a that is a thing. It is something that happens quite regularly in MMA, where like you'll get this nip tuck, very close round that is scored a 10-9, and then later on you get a much more clear cut round that is also scored a 10-9, and it's the same value. It's a little bit insane. It's the Johnny Hendricks versus GSP um, problem back in the day, where like people were incredibly annoyed that GSP won that fight, but it's like GSP won three rounds, and if you're going to give them all 10-9s, then he won the fight. And this was kind of the same thing. Although I don't think that there's any scoring criteria, because the second round for Aljo was probably the most dominant round. Like it would be like 10-9, 10-9, or it'd be 10-9, 10-8, 10-8, 8-10, 8-10, or something like that. And Aljo would still win. That's my personal opinion. Where does this fight go? Because I mean, you really can't rule out a trilogy here. Like it's kind of ironic that Aljo is 2-0, but like one win is by DQ, and then this win is like, I'm having a hard time thinking about how replicatable it is, because I don't think Aljo has found the magic potion, the pill, the X factor that's actually going to allow him to win the fights. Because okay, he's established that if he gets Jan down, he can get his back and lock him down. But the problem is, pulling up the stats here, he went 2 for 22 on takedowns. So when you get stuffed 20 times doing it, is that really going to be like a way to victory? And he still fades. He still has some cardio issues, which is always going to come back up as a title fighter, because it's a 5-round fight. If he doesn't get the finish, how confident are you in him? And I know this is sounding as a little bit dismissive of Aljo, and I don't mean to do that. I think Aljo is a very good fighter. I like him. I'm a fan. I am actually very happy that he got this one done, because I thought the disrespect he was being given by people, not picking against him, but the disrespect of people just like saying like 0% chance to win. No way. There's nothing he does better than Jan. There's nothing he can do to Jan. That was ridiculous, I thought. People were treating Jan Aljo 1 like it was GSP Sarah 2 or GSP Koscheck 1. Like, it was fairly insane. And also the fact that Jan was just like getting no blame for getting DQ'd, even though Peter Yan has a history of dirty fighting. Like, he's a history of eye pokes. He has a history of low blows. The one fight he lost before he got to the UFC largely had to do with like getting penalized for headbutting. Like, he's a dirty fighter. Let's not defend that kind of activity. And I think that would be an immensely good idea towards cleaning up the sport. Like, he's a fascinating technical fighter and a stone cold killer, but there are significant problems in his game in terms of the long term. What is next for Aljo? I think the answer is in play. I think they're pushing Dillashaw to that title shot. I think Dana White is very unhappy with Aljo, so you probably won't see him main eventing. You'll probably see him in the co-main event again, because for whatever reason Dana does not like him. I can't help but think that has to do with the fact that Aljo, early in his UFC run, had a contract dispute with the company and made them give in on some pay demands. And they never liked that. They never liked that. Look back at history of the UFC in terms of fighter pay deals. Anytime a fighter has, I'm doing air quotes, won the battle, they have pretty quickly been sidelined with just like bad promotion and treatment from the company. So there's that. And then for Peter Yan, whatever you want, really. He's still definitely in title contention. He's a guy who's beaten Aldo. He's beaten Sandhagen. So I guess the question would be like, who's at the top of the division that he's not fought that isn't Dillashaw? So let me just pull up the bantamweight rankings here real quick. and we can go there. I think there's already been some rumors, but I never take rumors seriously until they happen. Like, things fall apart. I think someone was saying Merab Dvalishvili. I wouldn't mind that fight. That seems like a solid fight. You could also do Dominic Cruz if you wanted to. That's got name value. That can headline something or be part of a big pay-per-view. And I could totally see the UFC doing that. Moving on down. Khamzat Chimaev, Gilbert Burns. This is another fight that has a mountain of hot takes going on right now. I'm going to say this. I would not say that Chimaev got exposed to most people. What I mean by that is I think most fans were hyped about Khamzat, but they weren't, I'm just going to say, they weren't MMA's messiah hyped. But there was a segment of the fan base that thought that nothing, not one moment of a fight, nothing. He's on his way to a title shot, and maybe at the title shot, Usman is maybe the only person who won't just get smished in 30 seconds. To those people, he got exposed. But for the most part, no, he did not. I think there are some limitations that were exposed that we may or may not have known. I think there are some defensive holes to his game from a striking standpoint. I think that his grappling is a little bit less overwhelming than I thought it was. Just a little bit. But it is still very, very, very overwhelming. And I do think that there are some cardio questions with him because he was getting tired at the end of his fight. So was Gilbert Burns. His fight was fought at an insane pace. But welterweight is a pace game. A big limitation of Burns has always been sort of this cardio knock on him. So the fact that he had a hard time out-cardioing a guy who has cardio as question mark does leave some questions, particularly if they do the Covington matchup that they are talking about. But on the good side, my God, is he core strong. Burns could do nothing from a wrestling standpoint. Absolutely nothing. And to me, that is insane. That is remarkable. That is crazy. That is I don't even know what to say about it. Beyond that, it was unfathomable how unmovable he was. He also definitely has a lot of toughness, a lot of heart, a lot of game. He's mentally strong as heck. He overcame adversity here. Something that we did have a question about him coming into this fight, but he delivered. And to me, that was stunning. This man who has been training for, I believe people have said about 4 years. Let me have a look at where his first fight was. I think he's been a pro for 4 years. Yeah, he's been a pro for 4 years. He's been fighting longer than that because he has a 2017 amateur bout, and presumably he was training before that because his amateur career was in Sweden, and they're fairly strict about like when you could start. So I'd say he was probably training at least for a year or two before that. So let's say 7 years on the high side, and of course he has the wrestling background and everything. But the progress that he has made is remarkable. The fact that you could legitimately say that Khamzat Chimaev is the number 2 welterweight in the world right now is insane because he's been on the stage for such a short period of time. I wouldn't say that he's definitely there because there's Covington, obviously, to talk about, and there is Leon Edwards. But he has beaten Burns. Burns was in that conversation for the number 2 guy, was probably a number 3 on most people's lists, and he got beat. And so it's like, it's Usman and then whatever combination of Khamzat, Leon, and Colby you want to put there, I'm okay with it. But that makes him a top 4 guy in his weight class, and one that I have no problem envisioning how he could beat Colby Covington and how he could beat Leon Edwards. I don't even necessarily have a problem. I don't even necessarily have a problem picturing him beating Usman, although I would pick Usman to beat him. I would at that, because I think that Usman would be by far the hardest to take down person he's fought, and I think is a cleaner striker than him. That being said, Usman's 2 fights with Covington, I have talked about it before. I don't think his game plans for either of those fights were particularly good, and you'd have to wonder would he have a bad game plan against Khamzat as well? So there is that as well. So it's definitely possible to see him winning that. He's on his way to something. Probably not a title shot right now. They're talking about him fighting Colby Covington. I think that fight is very, very interesting. There are some people who have said that like Covington's not an interesting opponent for him, and I've always said this: Covington is a fighter that I think a lot of people underrate chronically because of the Trumper gimmick, the political stuff, all of that, and I don't blame them. He is truly annoying, but the pace that he brings, the volume that he brings, could definitely, I think, be a problem. Like, I don't see Covington going out there and taking Chimaev down by any means easily, because Burns was having no luck. But he could possibly wear him down and put even a faster pace on him than Gilbert Burns did, because that is possible. That is the type of guy that Covington is. It's an endless gas tank. And he could wear him down. Because a 5-round fight, I do worry about Chimaev. That being said, Covington's got a lot of defensive liabilities. Chimaev hits hard. If Chimaev gets a dominant position, he could smash him. Fantastically interesting fight. Much like this one, to be honest. So, was Chimaev exposed a little bit? If you were like he's an MMA god and untouchable fan, absolutely, but I think that is a very small portion of the actual fan base. I hope so anyways. I do forget how like hyped people were just off of him beating John Phillips and Reese McKee though. So there might be more people than I'm thinking in that category. For Burns, I mean he's still there. He can fight more or less anybody you want to put him in there with. I don't know who really, like, maybe if Edwards loses to Usman, do that fight like that'd be fun. That'd be interesting. I guess it depends on how Edwards does though against Usman is sort of part of the problem there, and that might also be too far down the road. Maybe the winner of Vincente Luque, Bilal Muhammad. I'm not sure how hyped I am for that option, but it's on the table. It could work. As for the scoring of the fight, I mean, I gave Chimaev round 1, Chimaev round 3, Burns round 2. Burns got away with a possible soccer kick in the whole thing. When he was able to get it to grappling range, he had some luck, but I mean, being underneath Chimaev is a bad plan. And like I said, he ran low on gas himself, so not a ton else to say about that fight, but it definitely was our first look at Chimaev in a longer fight and against a very elite opponent, because no disrespect to the Leech, because I do love the Leech. The Leech is not a guy that should be your headlining act when we're talking about the absolute destruction that is a top-ranked prospect. That's something that has to be, I think, definitely kept in mind. Then we have Mackenzie Dern and Tisha Torres. This was the worst decision of the night for me. Oh, by the way, throwing this out here. Both with the Chimaev Burns fight. Maybe not. Yeah. There was this weird idea that like a fight should be split. Here's the thing about a split decision. I don't think any fight has to be a split decision. I mean that very seriously. Like, any fight that you have is understandable as a split decision, because you'll have rounds that could be scored either way. Like Peter Yan versus Aljamain Sterling, perfect example of that. That fight was a split decision. I have no problem with that. But there's no fight that has to be a split decision. Like, that's a ridiculous idea. If a fight can be scored for one fighter, there is an entire possibility that 3 judges will score it for that fighter. There's no fight that has to be a split decision. Like, my reaction to a fight going into a judge's scorecard is never going to be, No. This has to be a split decision. This absolutely has to be a split decision or majority decision or whatever. Like, I'll say it could be a split, or I think it's going to be a split, just based on what I've watched before. But there is no such thing as has to be a split decision. Like, this is insane. To the worst case of judging of the night, Mackenzie Dern beating Tisha Torres by split decision. I don't understand how you can give this fight to Dern. I understand how this fight could be a draw because Dern dominated round 2 with the guard pull into the Kimura. Very, very interesting. She got the Kimura a number of times, got some hyperextension on it. Super tough for Torres to grit it out and take it down, to get through it. It was the most definitive round, most definitive moments of the fight. For sure. And Dern, of course, we know, is an amazing grappler. She's working on her striking. It's getting better, but I don't really think that she's ever, despite the best efforts of Jason Perillo, ever going to be a great boxer. And someone did say, why doesn't she just work on her takedowns more? Because that probably is actually a better approach to success overall. Because, I mean, her problem is not your stand-up is bad necessarily. It's your stand-up is bad and you have a hard time getting against top-level competition to your world-class elite skill set in grappling. And obviously the trying to improve your striking is not necessarily a bad idea, but there should also be some takedown work in there. And it just doesn't seem to be getting any better in that regard. And it's the big problem here, of course, is that she won. People are treating this like a fresh taste to get into the strawweight title conversation, but I don't think we necessarily even need that. And I don't even really think she is, because who does she beat above Torres? Like, is she going to beat Weili Zhang, who's a much better put together fighter than Tisha Torres with similar skill set? Probably not. Is she going to beat Joanna Jacek? Probably not. Is she going to beat Thug Rose? Probably not. Is she going to beat Marina Rodriguez? She already lost to her pretty convincingly. Is she going to beat Thug Rose? Probably not. Like, I think she has a pretty reasonable chance against Carla Esparza, because like Esparza's not a super well put together striker and often will have to grapple with you to get the victory, and that could be suicide against Dern. So like that's maybe the one person. But it's also probably the least interesting fight option, unless Carla beats Thug Rose, which I don't think is going to happen. So spoiler for my predictions there. I do think Thug Rose will beat Carla Esparza. But like, from the scoring point of this, like how does Dern win the second or third round? Like, I am giving you the fact that she had the best round of the fight. I don't have a problem with that. But unless you're going to give that a 10-7 round or something, it doesn't get there. Because, again, let's look at the totals here real quick. Again, volume striking is not everything. Like, simply landing more shots is not a winning formula for a fight. Like, it's not that you can break it down like, I hit you 15 times, you hit me 10 times, I win. No, there's knockdowns, there's the quality of the strikes in there, there's hurting the opponent, there's rocking the opponent, and so on. There's damage criteria in there, but like, did Dern land harder than Torres at any point? She got outstruck 35-28 in the first round. She got outstruck 38-20 in the third round. And there wasn't really any grappling to really talk about, because, I mean, she actually got no takedowns in the fight. There was top control in round 2, and that was about it. So how does she win the first or the third round? I think that it's terrible judging by terrible judges, because I remember, I think it was Derek Cleary and Chris Lee that gave the fight to her. And if you're listening to the podcast, which I just put out this week, in terms of starting it up, this is like the first full episode of it, you're not going to maybe understand my ire with Derek Cleary and Chris Lee, but they're two terrible, terrible MMA judges. Like, supremely bad MMA judges. And they gave this fight to her. I don't understand. Like, again, perfectly happy with a draw. Perfectly happy with a 10-9 first and third for Torres, 10-8 second for Dern. Perfectly fine. This is not a Mackenzie Dern hate fest or whatever, because I have no problems with her. She is a flawed fighter but she's a flawed fighter who's trying to evolve, and that's all you can ask. That's literally it. She's doing what I want to see, which is someone trying to do something about the holes in her game or his game to become better and become the best fighter they can be. So, like, I'm a big Dern fan. I'm a big Torres fan as well. Probably a bigger Torres fan. I've been a big fan of Torres since Invicta. But, like, I don't. It's not a blind fandom moment here. But, like, Torres either won this fight or drew this fight. And this was, like I said, this was the worst judging of the night. There was another one where, like, a round went wrong or whatever. But, like, the right people won the other fights that went to the cards. This one had the wrong result, not just the wrong score, the wrong result. And I'm kind of annoyed by that. I thought Torres fought a really smart fight, because my concern with Torres is that a lot of her fighting tends to lead into positions where she can't be taken down. And she avoided that for the most part. A lot of her fights also lead to her thinking she can go to the ground with people and get things done. And she didn't do that. Like, it's so frustrating, because I think she fought about as close to a perfect fight as you can get, with the exception of the Kimura exchange, and did not get rewarded for it, which is frustrating. But we live, we move on. Marco Madsen versus Vince Pichel. Oh, I didn't talk about what's next. For Dern, I don't know, because the UFC definitely wants to promote Dern very, very highly. So I mean, like, do they treat this like a momentous win and move her into, like, title conversation? I wouldn't. I think she gets smoked by everybody up there. And that's the problem, is like, okay, what do you do with her then? Because I'm going to pull up the strawweight rankings here. I'm using the Tapology rankings, not the UFC's rankings, but they tend to be fairly, fairly close. It's just that the Tapology rankings go a little bit further down, and also give you, like, streaks and so on. Hibash has gone up to 125, presumably. So that's not really on the tables. Like, there really is kind of nothing, because, like, I'm not interested in her versus Thug Rose or Weili Zhang or Carla or Yana. Shannon Yan is on a 2-fight losing skid. She's already fought Rodriguez. She's already fought Verna Jandiroba or Jandiroba. I think did she not fight Verna? Because if she didn't fight Verna, that might be it. Yeah, there it is. She fought Verna. She fought Nina Nunez, Randa Marcos, etc. She's already fought Amanda Hebus, who actually was the other person that. I guess Amanda Lemos. Lemos is fighting Jessica Andrade. Is that going to be at 125 or is that going to be at 115? That's going to be at 115. Okay, Andrade is back at 115. The winner of that fight? Maybe. But, like, I don't know if I like that, trying to get her a win. And for Torres, she can do whatever. Honestly, I would love if they brought it an atomweight division just to give her the proper exposure and the chance at a title that she richly deserves. She's a amazingly fun fighter to watch. I know she doesn't finish people, but I love watching her fight. And then, like I said, Marco Madsen versus Vince Pichel. Madsen won this fight. I still have the same limitation thoughts I have about him. I'm not sure how well he can integrate his wrestling into MMA, because he seems very uncomfortable once the fight actually ends up on the ground, implementing offense and doing something other than pinning him. His stand-up is actually way better than than I ever thought it would get, but it's not going to be amazing. It's not going to be on its own enough to win fights usually. He's kind of beating people who are used to having wrestling as a safety net. Clay Guida, Vince Pichel. It's not really working. I have no idea where you go with either of these guys, because the other thing to keep in mind is, like, one's 37, one's 39. Like, the combined age in this fight was 76 years old. So there's definitely, like, limitations to where you can go with them just in general. They're not going to be around a long time, and they have like gaps to fill. So just put them in workmanlike fights and do what you can. Madsen will probably still be highly promoted because he's an Olympic silver medalist. He'll probably get someone who's going to try to wrestle him again. And he'll probably win that because if that's your path to victory, he does win. But I think against a really competent striker who is also a competent grappler, he's in trouble. That's about it. Also, the Twitter after this has been a little bit ridiculous because Vince Michelle's calling him a coward and stuff for not coming out and partying. And Vince Michelle is 39 years old, but it does feel like he can't be more than 24 sometimes. It's just insane. Ian Gary versus Darian Weeks. Okay, I got more to say about this one. Gary won, and won in clear-cut fashion. But his post-fight interview was pretty bad. He really does feel like a Conor retread and not nearly as charismatic as he wants to be. And he's a guy who I think has a lot of gaps in his game. Like, I think it'll develop. I think it'll close. But I don't think he has... Like, this is sort of similar to the Chimaev problem, where it's like, if you believe that Ian Gary is like a UFC caliber welterweight who will be around, maybe flirt with a low-end top 15 ranking, you're probably right. But if you think Ian Gary has the makings of a champion, the next Conor McGregor, the next cash cow, that I am not sold on in any way. He's beaten and been given trouble by two guys who, no disrespect to Jordan Williams, Darren Weeks, but they probably shouldn't be in the UFC in general. I don't think that Williams is ever really going to be caliber. I think Weeks has a lot of development to do. Doesn't really prove much. He didn't really impress me in either one. Yeah, he's got some good counter. He's got some good back foot game. There's some solid footwork, some good timing, good accuracy. Like, it's not that there's nothing to his game that is good. It's just there is nothing to his game that justifies the hype that he came in with. That's really all I would say. He'll get another kind of low ball. Now, I will say, unlike his English counterpart, his Scouse counterpart, Paddy Pimblett, who similarly has like the big hype for the gift of gabs and everything, he's young and developing. I think he has the physical skill, whereas like Paddy, I think, has like the flaws that are baked in and unfixable to his game. So I think if you're asking who's stock to buy on, Ian Gary or Paddy Pimblett, it is Ian Gary. I just don't think either of them are gonna live up to the hype that they have. Anthony Hernandez, Josh Frem was an amazing fight, but at the same time, changed my mind about nothing about either fighter. Like, they're fantastic action fighters. They push a high pace. They hit hard. They grapple. They'll go for submissions. They're well-rounded. And my God, is the defense of the actual structure of the game just horrifying to watch. They will get lit up. They lit each other up in this fight. MMA defense is often like the chronic thing that I bemoan, that like our defense and our consideration and putting together the game is actually quite poor, and these two are absolutely examples of that. That being said, it was a great fight. I enjoy it. I look forward to whoever they're fighting next. Give them an action fighter and let it do. I'm just saying, don't talk about like these two guys as guys who are going to build towards like a future title shot or a future like actual high-end ranking, because that's not happening. But fun as shit. Aspen Ladd, Raquel Pennington. I'm not even really going to talk about Raquel Pennington here because I don't think we learned anything new about her. I think Raquel Pennington is what she is. I don't say that necessarily as a bad thing, because I mean, what she is someone who fought for a UFC belt and has hung around in the top 5 of a division for like the better part of a decade, if not a decade. So like, you know, that's not a bad thing. Sorry, the little pad that I use behind the computer is slipping around. I don't know what's going on there. Anyways, I'll fix it later. I'll fix it later. My apologies. But the interesting thing here is Aspen Ladd, because Aspen Ladd is a mess right now. She's dating her coach for some time, and it's always weird to meld those two things because for two reasons. Number one, a relationship between a significant other or spouse, girlfriend, boyfriend, whatever, and yourself is supposed to be like more 50-50, even playing field. Maybe on like certain things you let the other one take the reign or whatever, but like it's a partnership that is on equal playing field, whereas it's hierarchical with a coach. The coach is right, you're wrong. And obviously mixing anything with the coach, be that business or personal, makes it harder to go somewhere else if it's not working as a fighter, and it's not working for Aspen Ladd right now. It's not. She looked lost in the Norman Dumont fight. She looked lost in this fight. She's trying some southpaw stuff that I think is a really bad idea for a fighter that already looks confused. Like, that's the thing, is like, if you're already looking lost and confused in the cage, it is not time to try not a new technique or a new way of going at it, but like a completely new stance and trying to alter your game entirely. I think that's a really bad time to do that, especially if you do not have an ace coach handling it, and her coach does not seem very good. Also, he had like a huge overcorrection on the because after a fight with Norman Dumont, he got a lot of stress for like being too hard on her because of the girlfriend-boyfriend dynamic that is also in the coaching relationship. And he was super supportive this time, super soft. And the fact that they were really confused that they lost the fight, don't get me wrong, they started getting some stuff right in the third round. They started wrestling Pennington. They started implementing a game that has historically beaten Pennington. I don't know why it wasn't there to begin with. And won that third round. So it's a 29-28. So you're like, oh, it's kind of a close fight. No, not really, because you clearly lost the first two rounds. And I don't think there's going to be a rematch here. Aspen Ladd clearly thinks there's going to be a rematch here. Not immediately, but she said, like, this is a close fight. This is going to go back. And, like, Pena said something about, like, her quarter being a complete clown show, talking about, oh, you're breaking her, and at no point was she breaking her. So, I think she needs to get to a new place, because it's a shame, because she does have like all the skills to be a good fighter at women's 135, because women's 135 is a pretty shallow division, pretty stagnant division. Talking about how Pennington's been in the top 5 and all that for like a decade. She's got power. She's got some hand speed. She's got strength. She's got some wrestling capability. She's got some technical striking. She is notably bad at finding her range. I don't know if it's an eyesight thing or a feel thing, whatever. Could be a number of different things, but she does definitely have a hard time finding her range. And she needs she needs better coaching. Again, is what it comes down to. Like, I hate to say this. And of course, that's the problem, is that, like, how do you leave your coach who's also your boyfriend? And I was also thinking about this. There are so few good boyfriend or girlfriend coaching relationships. Like, the closest thing I can think is like Pat Barry and Thug Rose. But the problem is there's a lot of other cooks in that kitchen. Like, there's Trevor Whitman, there's other kinds of things. Like, and Thug Rose, before hooking up with some of those coaches, was kind of a mess as well. So, like, I'm not even sure if that's a rousing endorsement. But, like, it's similar problems for JoJo Wood when she got involved with her coach back in Scotland, and then with John Wood. Mind you, I do think John Wood is a very good coach. And I think that, like, JoJo's problems are more just that she's hit a wall than, like, it's actually the coaching relationship. But obviously, it also makes it hard to separate that. And you can see that with when she left Scotland, she went through a pretty big downfall after turning that relationship off. So, like, you know, your personal happiness at the end of the day is way more important, but it does definitely complicate things with your career. So, like, don't get involved with your coaches. I don't know what to do with that one. Mike Malott versus Mickey Gall. I was worried about this fight with Gall. I picked Gall to win. He lost his fight. This is one of my few losses on the night. I guess we should go through the quick record here. 1, 2, 2 and 2, 3 and 2, 4 and 2, 5 and 2, 6 and 2, 6 and 3, 7 and 3, 7 and 4, 8 and 4. So I went 8 and 4. The losses were I picked Peter Yan, I picked Tisha Torres, and I picked yet to talk about Jared Vanderwall, but I also picked Mickey Gall. And the problem with Mickey Gall is that, he has to out-grapple people really, I think, to win, and he's not necessarily a super great grappler. He's kind of like Demian Maia, but like way down low. His stand-up is better than he's given credit for, but there's holes in it to be countered and to get hurt and then Mike Malott went and did that. And I feel bad for not picking Mike Malott now because he's from my neck of the woods, and actually would have gone to high school at around the same time as him in the same area. But yeah, I said this. I think honestly, Mickey Gall's worst decision in terms of long-term career was taking the fight and getting the fight with CM Punk. Like, it's his crowning his achievement to get into the UFC really, really quickly, but I think it forced him into an area that is not necessarily keen on development. Because when you're in the UFC, you're fighting constantly good fighters who are going to make you pay for every little mistake, and it's going to magnify the flaws in your game that much more, and he just didn't really develop. And now we're here. And here is not a good place because he's fallen to 7-5 as a fighter. He's now lost 3 of his last 4, with the only win being over Jordan Williams, which is not amazing. He was not close with Alex Morano. He didn't have the physicality to get with Mike Perry. His biggest win in the UFC is still Salim Touari, I guess. And, with losses to like a 2019 version of Diego Sanchez and a 2020 version of Mike Perry, which is not a great way to look at it. His career is in trouble at a time where it really, really kind of should just be getting going. Because, he's 12 fights into his career. He's born in 19... Okay, he's 30 years old. He's a little older than I thought. But, I don't know. It kind of feels rushed and undeveloped. For Mike Malott, he got the big shout out for trying to help out his coach's daughter with the stage 3 lymphoma, which, by the way, is terrible that in America you have to go through GoFundMe to fund the medical health care of your kids, but that's a little more political than you're probably looking for. And he'll go on to something else. I'm still in the USA. I'm still not sure how good he's going to be. He stepped away for like a really long time. He's kind of back now. He's a good grappler. He's got some sneaky heavy hands and everything, but he's not super physical, not super well put together on the feet. So I do think that there's still probably gaps that somebody's going to exploit at some point. And speaking of gaps, Alexei Olenek, Jared Vanderwall, why? Why does anyone go to the ground with Alexei Olenek? It's such a bad idea. Someone was throwing out the other day that it's because he's so awkward in terms of like what he hits with. Like, he wins with like Ezekiel chokes and scarf chokes. You're like, no, that can't possibly happen to me. But this is a guy that out-grappled Fabricio Verdum. I don't think it really gets much higher in MMA grappling than that, at least at heavyweight. It's insane. As soon as Vanderwall went for the triangle, I'm like, oh, we're done. Because you ain't getting that triangle. Yeah. And then he got scarf folded. It's particularly bad because like Vanderwall is a fine heavyweight fighter, but he drops to 12-8 off of this. He's not had a good run in the UFC. This is 3 straight losses to Alexander Romanov, Arlovsky, Olenek. He's 1-4 plus a Dana White Contender Series win over Harry Hunsucker, who is not good. We'll just leave that out there. And most of the notable people he fought before he got to the UFC beat him, with the, I guess, exceptions of Tony Lopez and Juan Potts. kind of are his highlight wins. So what's next for him might be just like getting cut, if we're being honest. And in the case of Olenek, whatever he wants to do, he said he wants to fight for like 5-10 more years. It's heavyweight. Might be able to do that. It's kind of weird because like whoever they book him up against next, I'm probably still not going to be able to bring myself to pick him because it's just so very obvious how you're supposed to beat him. But he'll probably win. I don't know. It's comedy at this point. Like there's no way that his game should work, but it does. It absolutely does. And I guess it's the chronic example of like MMA fighters will fight to their type, regardless of opponent. A lot of the time, there's not a lot of like opponent-specific game planning going on at times. Now, mind you, it might not be a game planning problem, like because it didn't seem like Van der Waal wanted to go to the ground with him, but like within the flow of a fight, like you're gonna do what your instincts tell you to do, and if your instincts have been to possibly go to the ground and throw the ground and pound, and Van der Waal definitely is, you have to avoid that and just resist it, I guess, and he couldn't. And then rounding off the night, we had two fights here. One, we're just going to quickly say, Julio Arce and Daniel Santos don't belong in the same cage, if we're being entirely honest. Arce is a super, super slick fighter, heavily underrated in my opinion. And he showed his class here today. Hopefully he won some fans. Santos, like he's interesting. He wins by spitting shit sometimes, so that's cool, but like he's got like a lot of ideas that aren't necessarily going to produce an actually decent UFC level fighter. And I'm losing my voice here, but I don't have anything else to really say about that one. I do remember one judge gave Santos a round, which I am confused by. That seems ridiculous. I think it was Eloise Rodriguez, I think, was a judge there. So like they kind of made the list. My list of super bad judges that I'm ready to disagree with. And then of course Kay Hansen versus Pierre Rodriguez, pardon me. Rodriguez looked good. She looked like as advertised. She's super strong. She's got some powerful punches. She's got some decent form. She kept up. She's pretty good at managing her cardio. I still think she's going to probably gas out if she gets a pace forced on her at some point. But this fight is just, it's Kay Hansen's hype and so on. It hasn't delivered. I know that making 115 before was like effectively a eating disorder that she developed to make weight. And that's kind of horrifying. And then she went up to 125, and then it's like, but you're 5'2" and you're not Jessica Andrade. And now back here, she can't make the weight again. So, I mean, I think it would be best to cut her because she's got time. She can go back to Invicta or LFA or whatever and learn some skills, learn some confidence, and find herself because she's kind of like Aspen Ladd. She also looks just very, very lost in the cage. She looks like she doesn't know what she wants to be. And in terms of being a fighter, like she wants to be a fighter, but like she doesn't seem to know where her strengths are at any given fight. The last two fights have been particularly bad. And if we're being honest, the win over Jinyu Fry is aging poorly because Jinyu Fry's run has been pretty poor. So there you go. What does this mean for Rodriguez? I don't really know. I need to see her against someone who's going to put a pace against her and like have a put together game and confidence to back it up. So, there you go. So I mean, I guess that's what I want to see next. Next up, we got the Vicente Luque Bilal Muhammad fight card. Not a lot of name value. Not a lot of name value. But I actually a lot of fights I am kind of looking forward to. I think that they're fun. I think there's gonna be a lot of fun fights there, and I'm looking forward to it. Including a heavyweight fight between Devin Clark and William Knight. Talk about two guys who absolutely should not be at heavyweight because of their size, the style they like to fight, their strengths in the cage. Like it's all bad. And we'll leave it at that. I hope you enjoyed it. Enjoyed this episode of the podcast. Join me next week for that. Or join me later this week for a prediction video of that, and then early next week we'll be breaking that fight card down, and that's going to be kind of the thing. Is going to be a prediction video and a prediction video on YouTube, plus on here on the podcast, and then the reflections will happen as well. And if there is no fight card, we'll talk about something going on, an issue within the MMA sphere, and that'll be it. So hopefully for a first try, this went well.